like to start by asking you to do me a little favor. If I just assume that what I say today you wouldn't share with anyone when you go out and leave. I know I appreciate that some of the sensitivity of what I'm going to talk about. I just assume the words that are spoken in this room would stay in this room. And I know I can't swear you to secrecy or anything like that, but I just ask that you'd honor and respect that. I'd also like to have you disregard everything that I just said. Because obviously, we're here to share the message. We're not going to keep it to ourselves. I don't know if you have picked up yet, but every message here spoken since September 8th has been tied to the Sunday school lesson that's being taught during this session. And so every theme parallels what's being taught. So right now, the students are being taught tell about Jesus. And so as we focus in on that, we know that Jesus, as he told people to go out, matter of fact, they're going to be studying the same lessons. They're going to be talking about how Jesus sent those out 2 by 2 to tell about him. They're going to be talking about the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 8, verses 19 and 20. And when Jesus sent them out, he didn't say, now, I want you to keep this kind of hush-hush. No, don't keep it a secret. Tell everyone. And he says the same to us. We are to share about the saving message of Jesus Christ with all those around. And we as a church have a mission statement. And the mission statement simply says, the mission of Lutheran Church of the Master is to make Christ known to all people, aiding them to become baptized believers, equipping them to be committed Christian disciples, and inspiring them to be servant leaders of Christ in God's world and church. And I wanted to kind of especially focus on that first point of our mission statement, to make Christ known to all people. Because that's what we're talking about as we focus in on telling others about Jesus. And I believe that we can more effectively tell other people about Jesus by putting into practice 3 essentials. And the first essential is to know your story. I believe that we're all fairly comfortable talking about ourselves. If someone asks us, oh, what do you do for a living? You can kind of, reel it off. Or if you're in school, what are your favorite school activities? What relationships are important? Can you talk? We can talk about cars. We could talk about clothes. We can talk about all sorts of different things. I can talk about my son got married last weekend in Minneapolis. So he just asked me, and you're going to get a lot. I mean, when we can very comfortably talk about ourselves, and that's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about telling other people about Jesus. Really, we're simply saying, tell others about how Jesus has affected your life. Know that story. Maybe you're like me. I grew up always knowing about Jesus. There wasn't a time that I didn't go to Sunday school, from a very little child. And so I can tell people how God has, affected me and guided me in my life. And how my life would be pretty bankrupt if I didn't have God there. Perhaps you're different. Maybe you didn't always have God in your life. Maybe there was a time where God wasn't important to you. But then there was that turning point that you became committed, a follower of Jesus Christ. And you can tell people, how was life before Jesus? And now, how is life so much better after Jesus? So it's simply knowing our own story and being able to share that. Now, Jesus in Luke chapter 10, our gospel lesson that Julie read for us today, he talked about, he sent out the 72 and 2 by 2, and he didn't say, okay, when you go to a house, get your checklist there, get it ready, and you say, okay, do you believe this? Kind of a theological thing, kind of check off, make sure they subscribe to all those beliefs, Heavens, no. He said, Share what you know. And they probably did something, like it was a Peter or his brother Andrew or James or John, these fishermen, or maybe Matthew, the tax collector that now is a follower of Jesus, or maybe anyone else. They say, you cannot believe about this amazing man, Jesus Christ, and what he did to my life. I mean, how it's changed and how he's affected so many other people. And they just kind of bubble with the story and tell them about the saving message of Jesus Christ. And basically we're talking about telling what we have seen and what we've heard. We have this concept in Matthew chapter 11. And what happened here, John the Baptist was in prison and he sent some of his followers to Jesus. And he said, ask Jesus, are you the one that we're expecting? Are you the Messiah, the anointed one? Or should we look for someone else? And Jesus simply said to the followers of John, he said, hey, just go back and see, tell them what you see and what you hear. And they did that. Another instance after Jesus had ascended to heaven is Acts chapter 4. Peter and John are before the Jewish ruling authorities, and they're kind of on the carpet. And they simply say, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and what we have heard. They didn't have it all written out. It was just kind of coming forth, oozing forth their story. The story of Jesus Christ. The story of Jesus Christ living in their lives. And so we have this first essential that helps us to be more effective in sharing Jesus Christ with other people. The first essential is to know your story. But the second essential is to take discipleship seriously. And to help me with this, I'm calling Wendy Current to come forward. She's our interim director of discipleship, interim coordinator of discipleship here at Lutheran Church in Master, and we kind of want to talk a little bit. I have a few questions for you. How about it?
Shoot.
Okay. Wendy, what are your thoughts about discipleship?
I love discipleship, and thank you so much, Pastor George, for inviting me to come here, because this is one of my favorite topics. The reason why I'm so excited is because it's one of the areas in the Bible that it is so clear. So if we move to the next slide, we'll see the words on the screen about the Great Commission. God very directly tells us to go out and make disciples of all nations. Here's the neat thing. As we read, regardless of what version of the Bible that you subscribe to and that you enjoy and relate to, it's some central themes. It's go, it's to tell, it's to make, it's to baptize. So all of those words are very clear and very easy to read. The challenge comes when we try and put it into practice. Sometimes we run into some barriers. And I think the thing that we need to remember is the Bible doesn't say, go train pastors out and disciple others. This is a commandment for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Wendy, do you have some specific ideas we can share on how to be more intentional in a life of discipleship?
Well, my tendency is always to jump into things and just start attacking them. But my prayer warrior friends always remind me that when it comes to mission, prayer is the first thing. Prayer before mission. Prayer before mission. So I would ask you, in your regular conversations with God, in your prayers and your reflection, ask Him, where do you need me to go, God? Where do you need to send me to have people who aren't hearing the message of Jesus Christ right now? I will listen. I will keep my eyes and ears open, but I need you to tell me that. But fair warning, you might get sent somewhere that's a little outside of your comfort zone. God has a funny sense of humor about that.
I found that out. Okay, so once God helps us identify these places where we need to be a disciple, how do we do this?
Well, that's where I get really excited, and that's where, when we look at the mission statement that Pastor George put up earlier, he talked about equipping servants, and that's one of the things that we need to make sure that we are very intentionally focused on. First of all, we need to reflect back on the words of St. Francis of Assisi. And I knew the saying, but Pastor George put in the annotation of who it was from. More than 900 years ago, St. Francis of Assisi made the comment, "Go, preach, and when necessary, use words." Those are the things that we need to remember. The old saying, the old Christian folk song, "They will know we are Christians by our love." Even when we don't have the words to say, we can show them through our actions.
Okay. Is there anything else we can be more intentional about as we disciple others?
Thank you. And intentional is a great word. We have to commit. We have to commit to being an intentional disciple. And the reason we have to commit is because what happens is we get distracted by this world we live in. We get really distracted. I'm really excited to share, and this will be out on the website starting tomorrow afternoon, and you can call the office. But I'm excited to share about 2 seminars that we're doing in November to help you with your discipling efforts. First of all is Living Your Strengths. It's a program that some of you may have heard of that's based through the Gallup organization, but this is the biblical version of it. And it talks about identifying what your God-given strengths are, what your strengths are that are unique to you, and how you can use those and where you can go to use those. So that's in Sundays on November. The first Sunday is Night of Worship, and the following 3 Sundays, we'll have a workshop outlining those pieces. Mm-hmm. The second piece, which I'm also super excited about, is Common Ground. One of the things that we've noticed in our culture is that we've become very segmented by generations. And unfortunately, some of that is creeping into our church and our faith communities. It's not unusual. It's happening across the nation. But we want to make sure that we're taking steps to counter that. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend 4 Monday evenings in November talking about ways that we can bring generations together, that we can identify what those barriers are and equipping you to find ways to overcome those barriers. Because what's the one place where we all come together as generations in our faith? It's the cross. So bringing generations together to the common ground at the foot of the cross is what we're working to achieve.
Oh, that sounds great, Wendy. Do you have any final thoughts on discipleship?
Thank you for asking. I think it's important at this point to make sure that we recognize those people who are being very intentional in their discipleship efforts. They're using their God-given gifts, and whether they realize it or not, they've figured out a way to put this into practice. But guys, as Julie read, the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. So we need to commit to this as a whole faith community. As I was preparing my comments for today, the one thing that kept getting placed on my mind by God was it takes a village to raise a child. So when we think about it from a discipleship standpoint, I want to offer the challenge or the thought perspective of it really takes a whole faith community to raise a disciple. We need to work together to do this, and that's what God wanted us to do, to have all of the different parts of the body of Christ working together.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. And so to be more effective in telling others about Jesus, what? We need to know our story. Secondly, we need to take discipleship seriously. And thirdly, we need to harvest with confidence. Now, we already saw that reference to harvest. Jesus talked about that. It comes to us in Luke chapter 10, again, the gospel lesson that Julie read for you. And Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that He'll provide those harvesters. And when He was talking about that, He's talking about, not harvesting wheat, but harvesting people. Kind of like when He said to, Peter, I'll make you fishers of men. He's talking about sending us out so that we might bring in others that would have the saving relationship of Jesus Christ in their hearts and their lives, just as we do. And so it's ever so important that we do that, go out into the harvest with confidence. One of the ways that at least helps our senior high students is something called Dare to Share. I know that we've done this for at least a dozen years. I remember taking the first group down to Lincoln for the Dare to Share conference, the weekend-long conference, Friday through Sunday. And it's where high school students get equipped to share the message with their fellow high school students. And it's a way to give them confidence in the sharing. And as I was there at that first time we went, sitting and listening to the speakers and watching the skits and everything, is great. And then Saturday afternoon, what they do, they made us go out. And, it was pretty comfortable sitting in the chairs, but now we have to go out and talk to people about Jesus. And they planned it in a very good way. They told neighborhoods that groups of people would come through collecting cans for the Lincoln Food Bank. But in addition, we would talk with people and, talk to them about their faith, ask if we could pray for them in any way, shape, or form. In a way, building confidence in sharing the gospel. And of course, as I said before, if you know your story and you're simply sharing your story, that's fairly easy to do with confidence. I've said this many a time, and I don't know who said it originally. I'd take credit for it if I thought I could get away with it, but I'm not going to. But I've said that God has not called us to be successful. God has called us to be faithful. And how that relates in our telling about Jesus, it's not up to us to somehow close the deal with every person we talk to. In other words, after developing a relationship with someone and sharing our faith, then have that person just drop to their knees in front of us, confess their sins, and declare that they're a follower of Jesus Christ for the rest of their life. That burden is not on us. We're simply called to share how Jesus Christ has lived in our lives and how Jesus Christ has affected our lives, and then let God take up the mission from there. Matter of fact, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, St. Paul was talking about when he was in the city of Corinth, and there were some issues going on there, but he said this, I, Paul, came and planted the seed, the message of the gospel here in Corinth. And then later on, Apollos came and kind of watered the seed. But God has been making it grow. In other words, God has just called me and Apollos. He calls us to be faithful in communicating the gospel of Jesus Christ. But don't worry, leave the rest up to God. And when we do that, there's a tremendous burden taken off our shoulders. It doesn't all depend upon us. We simply show what it means to be a Christian through the things we do, through the things we say. And maybe when someone says, your life's different, how come you're different? That's an opening where we can talk about how Jesus Christ lives in us. The same thing happened this was after Jesus' ascension. It's Acts chapter 4, talking about Peter and John and how they, actually this is with a 72 being sent out. And Jesus says, whoever listens to me, whoever listens to you listens to me. Whoever rejects you rejects me. And as I read that, I see what is happening here is that if we share our faith and someone says, that's fine for you, but I'm not having any of it, are we, going to somehow take that as a personal affront? God says no. He says, they aren't rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Again, the burden is taken off us. We can share our message with confidence, knowing that even if someone says no to us, we've been faithful to God's message before us. Kind of concluding, we look again at, or this time we look at our second lesson from Romans chapter 10, and it says this, Paul says this, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But he says, how can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one that they have not heard? And how can they hear unless someone has preached to them? And how can anyone preach unless he has been sent? And it says, as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And in a way, he's talking about us that bring good news to people that don't have good news in their lives. Through sharing our stories, through being a faithful witness, through being a faithful disciple, and with confidence sharing the great gospel message that we know for sure with others, and allowing God then to let it grow in their lives. Let's pray.